Hello and welcome to my session. My name is Trena Wilkerson. I'm immediate past president of the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics in Reston, Virginia. And I'm also professor of mathematics education at Baylor University in Waco, Texas. I will be talking with you today about mathematics and language, focusing on pre-K through third grades, specifically looking at valuing a language-rich approach to teaching and learning mathematics to support all learners in developing a deep understanding of mathematics. Please remember to download my handouts from the resource space on this website. Following my presentation, I'll be responding to your questions in that chat space in the Q&A. Now, let's get started. So in this session, we will explore what we mean by mathematics and language. Look at what research has to tell us around the importance of mathematics, language, and connecting the two. During this session, we will look at some of the issues and challenges and what we might do to address these. We will describe the importance of a supportive learning environment for pre-K through 3 learners. And throughout, we will share effective, equitable teaching practices to support pre-K through 3 learners, including multilingual learners. In particular, we will consider questions such as, what is the role of mathematics in language? The role of language in mathematics? In what ways are language and mathematics connected? How do they support each other? What are effective instructional strategies to support pre-K through 3 learners in developing mathematical understanding? And how do we position multilingual learners to support their success and support their positive math identity? So keep these in mind as we discuss at the end. So not long ago, I was part of an 8-member commission on the effects of language on children's conceptual understanding of mathematics, appointed by the Association of Teacher Educators to examine what we know about the role of language in mathematics. The commission was tasked with examining current theories, practices, and research on the effects of language on children's conceptual understanding of mathematics. One of the questions we addressed was, what are the effects of language on children's meaning-making and conceptual understanding of mathematics? And while there are many relevant aspects that are important, this work that we identified with were 6 areas to further investigate. So in this session, we will unpack some of these areas, and they were noted as follows. What mathematical language is and how it connects to meaning making and understanding, symbols, expressions, and language connections, effects of teachers' listening orientation on students' mathematical learning, mathematics language development, play and family influences, mathematics and multilingual learners, and digital and technology media. Let's start with the ideas behind these, and in particular, what mathematical language is and how it connects to meaning making and understanding for children. According to Joan Kinney and colleagues, for many students, the language is informal and is in many contexts such as home and community, and more formally in school settings. In school contexts, some students struggle to make meaning of the formal mathematical language and the related mathematical ideas, especially those whose first language may not be the spoken language in the classroom. And even further, when blending their formal and informal experiences, students encountered words and expressions having multiple meanings, such as words like odd, mean, and fraction. So it is important to identify effective ways to encourage students in academic language development and applications. Additionally, it is important to examine the diverse environments where mathematical meaning-making occurs and their affordances to identify effective ways of supporting students' language development. So let's consider first, what is mathematical language? Well, it consists of mathematical content, aspects of varied literacies, and modes of discourse. This occurs in the school, home, and community, and includes vocabulary, symbols, questions, technology, critical literacies, and a myriad of social interactions that children engage in, not only verbally, but reading and writing, listening, speaking, drawing, gestures, using dynamic technology, and much more, all of which provide children with ways to communicate mathematical meaning and sense-making, and are of particular importance for English language learners, multilingual learners, learners with special needs, or struggling students. There are many areas that influence learning, such as language diversity, language experiences, and opportunities to express themselves. In fact, this points to the importance of meaning-making in mathematics rather than the mastery of segmented aspects of mathematics, where we provide learners with opportunities to construct explanations, supporting their mathematical claims, that is, communicating their thinking. So thus, they are developing not only their mathematical understanding, but developing rich language, and this is essential for pre-K through 3. So one of the keynote speakers for this session is Dr. Judith Moskovich. She is a part of the summit. She's a well-known researcher in mathematics and language. She has noted the complexity of mathematical language, its specialized vocabulary, and the complexities of discourse. Here's one of my favorite quotes from her. She says, "I use the phrase, the language of mathematics, not to mean a list of vocabulary words or grammar rules, but the communicative competence necessary and sufficient for competent participation in mathematical discourse and practice. Thus, the language of mathematics is more than vocabulary and grammar, and we have an obligation to examine the multiple ways in which language and mathematics are connected. And we need to work intentionally in our instructional planning and teaching to provide opportunities for each and every learner, starting in pre-K, to engage in rich experiences to develop mathematical language." Since the 1980s, the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics has emphasized a critical role of communication with particular attention to the role of discourse and its contribution to the development of language by learners, and the connection to their ability and opportunity to express their ideas. In 2014, NCTM described 8 effective mathematics teaching practices in Principles to Action. They each contribute to mathematical understanding and development of language, starting from the goals we identify to the tasks we select, how representations are used, the facilitation of discourse in the classroom, including the role of questioning. And each influences how students develop procedural fluency and deep conceptual understanding, and how students are supported as they engage productively in problem solving. Further, how students communicate directly connects to how we can find evidence of their mathematical thinking and use it to inform instruction to support their learning. There are 2 that I want to highlight in connection to mathematics and language. One is facilitate meaningful mathematical discourse, and the other is implement tasks that promote reasoning and problem solving. So let's take a look at the first one. So the effective practice of facilitating meaningful mathematical discourse states, effective teaching of mathematics facilitates discourse among students to build shared understanding of mathematical ideas by analyzing and comparing student approaches and arguments. What resonates with you regarding mathematical discourse? What questions come to mind? What are effective ways you have used to facilitate meaningful mathematical discourse? Discourse is described as a critical instructional tool in all learning environments. In a mathematics classroom, multiple forms of discourse, like verbal, written, gestures, they provide children with opportunities to share ideas, to clarify understanding, and to construct mathematical arguments, and also to develop language to express mathematical ideas and learn a diverse repertoire of mathematical perspectives. So, consider how you support a learning environment that supports meaningful discourse. And as students share their mathematical thinking, they clarify their own thinking through the mathematical language. It supports valuing their contributions in classroom discussion, and these young learners can draw on their own knowledge, their own experiences and resources that they bring to the task and the learning experience. They learn from each other, and we as teachers learn from them. So the other effective practice I want to highlight is implement tasks that promote reading, reasoning, and problem solving. It states effective teaching of mathematics engages students in solving and discussing tasks that promote mathematical reasoning and problem solving and allow multiple entry points and varied solutions. The writers go on to say that becoming competent problem solvers is a key component in learning mathematics, and using mathematical tasks that promote and motivate learning and support children to learn mathematics and to build new mathematical knowledge through problem solving and reasoning is very critical. Math educators such as Joe Bowler and Marion Small remind us that tasks that encourage these multiple approaches and multiple entry points support positive orientations toward mathematics and engage the learner in sense-making and that of mathematics. Tasks should be culturally relevant whenever possible and draw on children's funds of knowledge, that is, the resources that children bring to the classroom, including their home, cultural, and language experiences. This, in turn, will help support each student's mathematical identity and agency in the classroom So the task matters. So these two effective practices taken together kind of highlight the importance of mathematics and language. In 2020, NCTM released Catalyzing Change in Early Childhood and Elementary Mathematics, Initiating Critical Conversations. They offered 4 recommendations for us to bring together voices to have critical conversations to address these issues. The first was related to broadening the purposes of learning mathematics. The second called for us to create equitable structures to support mathematics for all. The third is to implement equitable, effective mathematics instruction. And fourth, to ensure that all students develop a deep mathematical understanding. So let's look at the first recommendation just a little bit further. The goal, and this one is broadening the purposes of learning mathematics so that each and every learner develops a deep understanding of mathematics, builds a positive mathematical identity, and is able to use mathematics to understand and critique their world. This focuses on meaning making in mathematics, for which mathematical language is central. There's consequently a need for teachers to attend to the development of mathematical language to support students' meaning making and mathematical understanding. Provide opportunities to explain their thinking, use their language to describe their thinking. We need to support opportunities to use mathematical language. For young children, this is the beginning of number sense language, quantitative language, to support reasoning, informal and formal fractional language, geometric and spatial language, and algebraic language regarding patterns and relationships. The language we use as teachers also matters, and this helps students to develop mathematical language and connect to their own culture and language. We need to support them in using general language, such as sometimes or always, to provide clarity in mathematical thinking. We need to support students in the use of their informal language, to move to a more precise mathematical language as well that is based on their experiences as young learners for complex and often abstract ideas that are critical in mathematics, such as the equal sign. It may seem like a simple idea, but in reality, it's very complex. The writers of Catalyzing Change compel us to remember that the language we use is important and it should intentionally be reinforced so that it develops deeper conceptual ideas and understanding. It is essential that we examine the structures in our schools, districts, and states, and related policies and ask others and ourselves, are those supporting our pre-K3 students, and for that matter, all students, to develop mathematical language that supports their deep understanding of mathematics? Are we implementing effective, equitable mathematical instructional practices that support and expand mathematical language for all students, which should lead to developing a deep mathematical understanding? The authors of Catalyzing Change for Elementary and Early Childhood state, we have the capacity to create change so that each and every child can have access to learning environments that are designed as mathematically powerful spaces. In such spaces, all children are provided opportunities to engage in reasoning and sense-making and develop deep mathematical understanding. We are challenged then to foster learning environments that provide these opportunities for children to use their language, to share their understandings with their peers, with their teachers, and their families. However, as stated in Catalyzing Change, what we know is that children's mathematical experiences are of uneven quality at every level. There are disparities that exist in individual classrooms, across grade levels within schools, and across schools within districts. The evidence is compelling that children who are identified as Black, Latinx, Indigenous, language learners, poor, and with disabilities, along with other marginalized learners, do not have the same opportunities as their peers to access and learn in mathematical powerful spaces. So, you are familiar, I am sure, with the NAEP headlines from 2022. Let's look at these just a little bit further. So what do you notice? What do you wonder as you examine the graphs of the trends of 4th and 8th grade mathematics scores from NAEP? In 2022, the average 4th grade mathematics score decreased by 5 points and was lower than all previous assessment years going back to 2005. The average 8th grade mathematics score decreased by 8 points compared to 2019, and scores decreased even more across previous assessments going back to 2003. In 2022, 4th and 8th grade mathematics scores declined for most state jurisdictions etc., from 2019, and that is before COVID. So many students missed opportunities to learn during COVID, and we continue to work to address those missed opportunities. We are making progress, but have more to do. Further analysis of fourth grade, when you get into the details, reveals that scores declined for American Indian, Alaskan Natives, Asian, Black, and Hispanic students, students of two or more races, and white students. And in 8th grade, there were consistent score declines for Asian, Black, Hispanic, and white students. But the thing to remember is that there were gaps between the white students and the Black and Hispanic, and it's gotten even larger in 2022. So, well, what about reading? That certainly connects to language. Again, what do you notice? What do you wonder? And again, reading declines, but perhaps not as steep as mathematics. But basically, we're back to where we were 30 years ago. Based on the NAEP results and additional findings from leading researchers in mathematics education, such as Robert Berry, Rochelle Gutierrez, and Marta Seville, just to name a few, we must address the disparities in learning opportunities for all students, particularly as our focus today related to language, among other disparities. We must disrupt existing inequitable practices and policies that are negatively impacting the learning of our pre-K through 3 students. Early childhood years are key and essential for providing that foundation for a deep understanding of mathematics. We see these disparities emerge in early grades by labeling students' abilities as early as preschool and kindergarten. This is often called readiness, and often a single indicator system is used to measure a child's so-called ability and determines placement in special education programs, ESL programs, and other services upon elementary school entry. And this is one indicator that can separate children into tracks that research has already shown limits opportunities for learners when we need to be in a place and space of expanding those opportunities. As shown in Catalyzing Change, this statement states, high-stakes assessments and readiness measures lead to the labeling and sorting of children, resulting in segregation, marginalization, or privileging that is strongly correlated with race, language, class, and ability status. We need to remember that children's wellness, development, approaches toward learning, and mathematical knowledge and skills should be measured through the wise use of a variety of assessment tools and methods that are sensitive to children's diverse cultural and language backgrounds. Further, the decisions we make regarding mathematics curriculum and teaching practices should be grounded in children's knowledge of their development and learning and building on their informal knowledge of mathematics and experiences, including their family, linguistic, cultural, and community backgrounds. We are reminded that mathematics should be related to children's questions, their interests and lives, and build on family, community, and cultural funds of knowledge. This includes their home, culture, language, and experiences in their community. This centering of children in the mathematics not only helps support their emerging identities, it also helps build their agency and allows them to understand and critique their world, which is so important and was the first recommendation in Catalyzing Change. It makes it relevant to the children and supports their development of mathematical language, and we need to honor this. So let's talk a bit more about student language, and in particular, multilingual learners. Lee and Stevens summarized key findings of the 2018 National Academy of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine Consensus Report, English Learners in STEM Subjects, Transforming Classrooms, Schools, and Lives, stating, as English language learners engage in STEM disciplinary practices, such as developing models, arguing from evidence, constructing explanations, they use language for the purpose of making meaning of STEM subjects through social interaction with peers and with their teacher in the classroom. Catherine Cheval and colleagues, in a book called Teaching Math to Multilingual Students, grades 5 through 8, Positioning English Learners for Success, shared some materials, resources, and effective strategies to provide English learners with enriching opportunities to deepen their understanding of mathematics. I'd like to share some. And these in particular position multilingual learners as valued in the classroom. First, ask multilingual learners to share their mathematical thinking with the class during discussions. Ensure that all students are respectful listeners as the student presents. Have multilingual learners present their ideas at the board or using technologies in ways that show the visual and that they can have as a reference point. Encourage multilingual learners to teach their peers. Assign ownership of mathematical ideas or strategies to multilingual learners, such as, well, this is Lorena's slide. Give multilingual learners time and space to process and communicate their thoughts. This is important. Ask multilingual learners to share their mathematical thinking in their first language, valuing their ideas and their language. Ask multilingual learners to read in their first language. Ask them to share their words and phrases in the different languages, to share their knowledge and language with the class. This positions multilingualism as valued, and they learn from each other. And sometimes provide multilingual learners time and space to share their ideas with you as the teacher before sharing with the whole class. This gives them time to practice speaking their ideas aloud to others. What about how to support student engagement and participation? Remember that students learn from each other, not just from the teacher. Consider how to facilitate partner problem solving, to engage multilingual learners through culturally relevant contexts and facilitate discourse strategically. And then we discussed that previously, so that multilingual learners have powerful opportunities to learn. Student participation is a crucial component for mathematical learning for every student. Participation supports language development, both mathematical and learning English or another language. But this reminds us that the learning space must be safe for all learners, one where they're not afraid to share their thinking or fearful of making a mistake, but rather are encouraged to share their thinking and talk through solutions to make sense of them and be supported in doing so. We need to remove barriers for multilingual learners so that they are successful. Creating learning spaces that foster a sense of community, a sense of belonging, and that value of students' thinking is really essential. Students in pre-K through 3 and beyond should be encouraged and expected to communicate their mathematical thinking and understanding to their teachers, to their peers, to their families, orally, writing, drawing, gestures, other means of expression, using the language of mathematics and values their language and culture. This gives them voice, supports the development of positive mathematical identity, and gives them agency in their own learning. It allows more students to have meaningful participation in classroom discussion. Well, you recall earlier I shared the first recommendation, catalyzing change, and it was broadening the purpose of mathematics. My favorite part of that recommendation is that children should experience the wonder, joy, and beauty of mathematics. Joy occurs while being in the moment with mathematics, being proud of your accomplishments, and feeling the intrinsic reward of persevering when you're going through productive struggle that's associated with solving mathematical problems at times. This joyfulness occurs most often in child-centered classrooms that promote active, inquiry-based, language-rich exploration in important mathematics. These experiences can support children's language-rich exploration. It can support their positive math identity. However, for children to experience the wonder and joy in learning mathematics, so must we as their teachers. We need to all experience that wonder, joy, and beauty of mathematics. So Amy Parks at Michigan State shared about bringing joy into the mathematics classroom in a blog post in 2018. She pointed out two things. First, research on how children learn supports that young children learn mathematics best when they are engaged. They're engaged in the learning, the classroom, and they are not stressed. The second is we have an ethical responsibility to ensure that the learning spaces and opportunities bring students joy, not sadness and misery. She suggests that we ask ourselves these questions. When in mathematics do children seem happiest? What do you enjoy most about math teaching? When are both you and the kids most engaged? And how can we figure out a way for you to do more of the things that make you happy? When in math, do your children seem sad or bored? When do you feel frustrated or angry? And how do we do less of those things? So Dr. Parks in 2020 also shared some strategies to create joy in the learning environment. And I'd like to share these with you. Create space for play. Allow children to make choices. Offer problems that really allow for exploration, social interaction, and material engagements. Relax a little about time on task and create caring relationships. In this article, there's a video of a 4-year-old as he begins counting his toy bugs without prompting. Let's listen in.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12.
Okay, count again.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Good job. How many you have?
10.
Good.
So he is just playing, but he is passionate about his counting. The teacher enriches this engagement by asking him to count again and to restate the total, which helped him to begin to develop one-to-one correspondence. And in moments like this is when we show how even skill practice can be done in the spirit of joy. Well, that leads us to thinking about, well, what can we do? So here's some thoughts. Be intentional in creating learning experiences that bring joy of learning mathematics. Encourage students to be curious and creative and to ask questions. Celebrate the brilliance and unique contributions of our students. Challenge students so that they can explore and make connections. Inspire students to see mathematics as they encounter their world. And situate students in tasks in which they find joy and productive struggle that is appropriately supported. So let's find our joy, focus our joy, and bring that joy to the teaching and learning of mathematics. And consider how these deepen understanding of mathematics and create spaces for language development. So at the beginning of the session, I shared 6 areas for consideration of mathematics and language, and we unpacked some of them in detail and others in less detail. But here's a final comment about each one. Mathematical language is used formally and informally as students communicate their thinking to make sense of mathematics. We need to consider the complexities of abstract concepts and meanings of symbols, such as the equal sign. It is a critical concept connected to a symbol and then added in the complexity of how this is understood in varied languages. So we have been reminded that talking about one's mathematical ideas and listening to others is an essential feature of interactions and communications that support meaning making. When communicating their mathematical thinking, the manner in which students feel listened to or not by their teacher and peers affects their academic and emotional engagement with the content. The role of play. The role of play in developing mathematical understanding and language is critical. It brings joy to the learning. It is through exploring the ideas and working through their informal meanings that a learner becomes engaged and take ownership of those ideas, further embracing and valuing the experiences that learners bring with them to the classroom from home and community, expand the opportunities for learners, builds their positive math identity and sense of agency. One final thought regarding multilingual learners is from Driver and Powell. They say that they encourage the combined use of culturally linguistic responsive instruction where teachers consider the unique learning characteristics of their students, including native language, English language proficiency, race and identity and ethnicity, home and community culture, and past educational experiences. And then finally, one that we mentioned a few times in technology, an added aspect is the role of technology and digital media in relation to mathematics and language. It is imperative that we continue to explore and research the connection and impact that technologies have on student learning of mathematics and on language development, particularly in young children. Technology has provided an enriching way for many learners to communicate their thinking, to model mathematical ideas, to explore, to engage in discourse, and there's so much more to learn. So here's a reminder of our questions we started with at the beginning of the session. I hope you found some useful ideas that will support you in your journey of valuing a language-rich approach to teaching and learning mathematics that supports all learners in developing a deep understanding of mathematics. So, what are we to do? What will be your next step, your next action? What can we do together? Who should we bring to the conversation? Who should we bring to the collaborations? What are the policies, structures, assessments, practices, and instructional practices we need to address? Where are those partnerships that we need to do this work? So recently, NCTM released a position statement on mathematics in early childhood learning and stressed the following. Early childhood learning lays the foundation for a child's mathematical journey, and that young children flourish when supported in rich learning environments, yet access and outcome vary significantly by social identities, and these speak directly to mathematics and language. They listed some must-dos for us to consider, and I wanted to share those with you. The first is capitalize on the wonder and joy children naturally bring to their mathematical learning and their observations of the world. Use curriculum and teaching practices that build and strengthen children's problem solving and reasoning. Accept and appreciate that all children have rich and diverse cultural, linguistic, home, community experiences on which to build that mathematics learning. Build partnerships and opportunities for collaboration with students, families, community leaders, and policymakers to address the barriers that we may find in educational attainment. And then finally, develop systems of reflective practice across affected parties for equitable access to early care and childhood mathematics learning. So, which one of these resonates with you? Even though this is complex work, we must commit and invest long-term. We are not alone on this journey. We can do this together. I look forward to your questions, your ideas, and your comments. Thank you. I hope you found some ideas that sparked some thinking for yourself. Some of the ideas, yes, Jolie, definitely continuing the journey. Doug, yes, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Hopefully you all found some ideas, especially for early childhood and thinking about this. I think it's so important for us to be considering this and really thinking about what we do, and what we do really does matter. And just think of all the beautiful opportunities we have for children if we start them early and thinking about math and language. Did any of you have any comments or thoughts or wonderings when you saw the little 4-year-old counting and about the opportunities for math language there? Or did you think about joy? What brings you joy in teaching and learning? Oh, some of my favorite resources. Oh my goodness. Emily, one of the things that I really like to do, and I didn't even really talk about this in the session, is I love to use children's some of my favorite resources. I really love to use children's literature, and I really didn't talk about that. And I think that's one of the powerful ways to bring in mathematical language, particularly when you find out what the interest and the background cultural information about your students, and letting them have those opportunities as well. So I think that really guides us a lot in using some of those strategies that were mentioned in some of the slides as well. All right. Yeah, and yes, I agree that I feel like this does relate to 4th and 5th graders. In fact, a number of these things relate to students, learners across grade levels. I think there are many of them that we just have to modify in the way that we may give those opportunities, like representations, for example. Those would be expanded in different ways as students got older and maybe use more technology, for example. Yes, thank you so much about the one about curriculum developers. I think their voice is a huge one in this. We need resources. Teachers need resources that are easily accessible and easy to use with students, and really build in opportunities for students to use language, both in writing and speaking and listening, all of those things. I think that's really important. Let's see. Doug, you said, did I miss what you've said about between math language and using children's own language and how to honor? Yes, that's so important. There were a couple of times that was talked about, because it's really important to use their language, both in informal to lead to more formal mathematical language, but to use their language and build on that. So I think that's very powerful and very important, particularly bringing in when you think about multilingual learners and valuing their language, not English necessarily, but other languages. And so that shows the value of all languages. Okay. Yes, Sandra, I love children's literature. And so I just think that is a really powerful way. Oh, Linda, thank you for sharing your joy, the excitement. That is exactly right. Our joy often is sparked by the joy that is brought to children. That is really true. And I can tell you, if you're not enjoying teaching the experience, it's probably likely that the students aren't enjoying it very much either. So I know sometimes that's challenging when it's not our favorite topic, but we need to bring that joy to our students, and then see that joy in them as well. So I love that. And I think at the end of the PowerPoint, if you download the resources, it does have a bibliography of different references and things that were done. So that may be helpful as well. All right. What about, have any of you thought about what are some particular barriers that you've run into that make it challenging to think about mathematics and language? Are there any particular barriers, and then maybe even how you might have addressed that? I love that, Brentley. Hi, Brentley. Good to see you, or hear you, or watch you write. Joy is very important. Have you run into any particular barriers that you might want to share, or that might be helpful for us to think about? I love that, Jolie, using their own language. And just think what we all learn from that and the joy that brings to everyone, and values the student's voice, values that. And I think that's very powerful. And I think that's an important way for them to share and to build that positive math identity, and in a beautiful way for other students to learn as well. So I think that's very important. Time. Saffron, that is really true. Time is one of those that is really, really powerful barrier sometimes. But I think sometimes if we think about ways that we can capitalize on really powerful things that we need to do that will be long lasting, I think that's really important, because then the time invested is really worth it. It is what we really need to be doing. Oh, Barb, that's a good point too, is thinking about where is the place of vocabulary word, and thinking about that. And it's more about the development and leading to it. And you're right. Sometimes we spend maybe too much time at the beginning really thinking about, like, here's the definition, rather than the discovering and the interaction that students do. And then they learn the characteristics, or these are and these are not, different ways that we can do that. Love that. Let's see. Dave, you said many people are learning math as separate from communicating about math. That's a good point. And it is a process where they are connected. So it is not separate. That is a really important point. Manipulatives, Emily, I'm all about that. They bring joy. They bring that understanding. They help to develop that procedural and conceptual understanding. But again, time and classroom management, just managing the materials, is a challenge. Okay. Oh, yeah. Oh, yes. And Duane, I might not be pronouncing your name correctly, so please feel free to correct me. We will end in 30 seconds, but I really think that's very powerful. We have a lot of tools these days that can really help us with that. So I love that. Okay. All right. Thank you all so much for being here, and I hope you continue to enjoy the summit. It's been a really wonderful learning experience for me. Take care.